are you? How the heck are you?
We're going to do a podcast.
So let's get a little deeper into your story, shall we? Who are you?
Well,
that becomes a sticky wicket. You know, what's your juice? Let's get back on track. You've got a lot of things going on. What is it that you're curious about? What do you do?
Run the world.
Right? Well,
like, let's crumble up some philosophy for you.
boom, 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 boom. It's been a whirlwind for you. What is it that supercharges you about this? Lots going on, lots coming up. Or is that too many stuff? Did I ask too many questions?
No, not too many questions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mind Your Own Business, the Chamber podcast. I am Mo Belliveau, your host today. And this is the podcast where I get to speak with Chamber members, local business folks, professionals, local thought leaders, and entrepreneurs about who they are, what they do, and most importantly, why they do it. Before we get started today, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to E-Media. We are here today in their studio, and they are our partners in this project, and it's been a few years now, and I so appreciate Jeff Mastriani, Executive Director, and his team, and especially Jackson Foote, who is our production coordinator, and he helps make us sound and look fabulous. So thank you. So with no further ado, I get to talk today with Colleen Delvecchio of Maxady, LLC, where she is Chief Maximizer, founder, owner. Any other title that I should throw in there for you?
Coach, trainer, kind of all of the above. Jack of all trades, Jill of all trades, I guess.
Jill of all trades. Welcome. I'm delighted and excited to have you here today.
So excited to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen you. Saw you briefly over the holidays, but we didn't get to really chat because you were hosting and you were very busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so I was delighted. Let's just dive right in, shall we? How the heck are you?
I'm good.
Good. All is well.
Sure.
You've got
I have so much going on right now.
Right.
But it is fantastic. It's all good things that are coming my way.
Yeah. Before we dive into our into the questions that I have here for you, I wondered if you could maybe share with the audience, kind of who you are.
Sure. So, Colleen, I am a mom to two 19-year-olds who are both away at college, have a husband and one dog back at the house as well. And for me, I've always been a coach. I feel like my whole life I've been a coach from early years on up, and have had kind of a squiggly career to kind of get me to where I am.
Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you for being such an important part of my journey, being so generous with your time and creativity, in particular around She Leads, the Chamber Women's Conference, Professional Leadership Conference. So I appreciate all that you are and all that you do for me. And not only that professionally, but even on a personal level, it's interesting because when I first met you, we had more time to have coffee and or lunch or what have you. And I remember you saying that, you try to make it a point to do that with others throughout your week or day. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I was thinking, I wish I had a mentor. I wish I had somebody. And then I'm like, Colleen Delvecchio has been doing that for me for years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, for me, it's really important, particularly now that I'm an entrepreneur and mostly a solopreneur. I have some folks who work for me part-time, but mostly working by myself every day. It's important for me to leave the house and go have coffee and lunch, or sometimes it's on Zoom if there are people from other parts of the world that I do this with. But to me, the connections are so important, right?
Yeah.
It's what makes everything happen.
Well, and I'm so appreciative of it, and you're so generous with that. And it's, with everybody you come across.
It's self-serving too, right? Because I love it too. It fills me.
Right.
Right. It's what fills me up. If I have to sit at my desk all day and type away on my computer, I'm exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to get out of the house and just even meet someone for a half hour, an hour, it fills me up. It makes my day go much better.
I hear that. So let's dive in. I would love for you, if you could walk us through your entrepreneurial journey from the inception of Maxady to where you are today?
Sure. So for years, Maxady was like the side gig that was out there as Colleen Delvecchio Consulting from, probably from about 2004 on. It was always, I would have a full-time job and I'd have a few coaching clients on the side, or I'd end up with a consulting gig here or there. I'd have some nonprofits who'd want me to come in and help them figure out how to put their board of directors together, right? I had all these kind of little side gigs. And then just almost 5 years ago now, I was working at Smith College. My position got eliminated. And I was like, this is the time, right? If there was a time to try this full time, this is it. I was nervous as all hell because, the idea of, to me, not having that steady weekly paycheck was terrifying. I am not a risk taker, right? I do not like risky things. And so this felt like...
I find that interesting because I see you do that all the time.
Well, and I always say I feel like I take very specific risks. And risks, in my mind, that was a risk that was going to affect my family in that sense. And that's what I think terrified me. The not weekly paycheck, I was the one who had carried the insurance at the time, and giving up the insurance we had was terrifying.
Right.
And so, and looking back on it, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I did it 10 years earlier.
I know, right?
Like taking that first leap, it took having a position get eliminated for me to jump into it and say, right, okay, if this doesn't work in 6 months, I'll apply somewhere and I know I can get a job.
Sure.
Right? I have no qualms. And really, worst case scenario, I said I'd go waitress again or work at Target, right? I will do what it takes to make money, and that's important to me. But to get there, right, I just started, I threw it out there, I shot it out on LinkedIn and Facebook and just let everybody know that I am now opening my doors, came up with a new name of Maxady, which was kind of a fun scenario to come up with. We sat there with my husband and my kids, and we kept trying to look at my Gallup Clifton strengths, and my top strengths is maximizer.
Right. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, because that is your foundation in the work that you do, which has affected so many folks within our community in such a positive way. And people talk to me about it all the time.
My goodness, I love the Clifton Strengths.
Yeah.
Right, so Gallup owns the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It's Gallup or the Gallup Poll people, so they're a research-based organization, and Clifton Strengths is one of the many, many things that they do. And Clifton Strengths really, it's an assessment that has 34 different talents that it rates for you when you take it in order of 1 to 34, of which are your kind of dominant talents, which are the things that you are better than others at. And I remember first looking at it and thinking, oh, it's just like every other assessment out there, right? I'm a career coach by trade, and there's a million different career assessments. And then this one was just different. It doesn't tell you what career you should have, but it tells you kind of almost like how you're going to approach things, right? How you're going to lean into things. And because Gallup being a research organization, all the research behind it shows when people use their strengths, they're 20% more productive. They like their jobs better. And my favorite stat that has come out from their research is people who use their strengths every day have 81% less absenteeism.
Right.
81% less, right? To me, that means people like their jobs because they're not getting sick. They're not taking the days off that they hate their jobs.
Stress.
Right. Less stress.
Which is a killer.
Yep. All of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Maxady came from my top strength as maximizer. And I sat in my kitchen with my husband and my kids, and we were trying to figure out a name for my company using maximizer. And everything's taken in the world, right? Because we need to find the name, then we need to figure out the website, and then the Instagram and the LinkedIn, and all of those things. And I kept saying, it's like I'm adding maximizer to companies. And we kept just playing this, and I forget who, somebody said Maxady. And then we played with it for probably about a month or two. And I was like, ooh, I kind of like it now. I love it. And then I found a great company who kind of figured out a beautiful logo for me, which I will say, I love my logo.
It's absolutely beautiful. It is simple, tasteful, impactful. And I love how it, and your website also.
Yeah, same people did it.
Just as beautiful. Just as beautiful.
And I will say, when the folks did my logo, there's actually a story behind it that I don't tell often, but they were looking to try to figure out how they could use my initials. So they were trying to figure out how they could use C and D in it, and then an M in it for Maxady. And when they started playing with it, they ended up coming up with it's a very Celtic looking
it's beautiful
symbol. That also, when you look at it, also has a C, a D, an E, and an M, which are the initials of myself and my family members, my husband and my daughters, which they didn't purposely do.
Right.
And it has a heart in the middle, which they purposely did. And because they said they felt like I coached from the heart. That was their kind of take on me.
You absolutely do.
And I loved that piece. But then I said to them, like, they didn't even know that I had a child who had open heart surgery and how much that had affected us as a family and brought us together and, was a big impact on her. And so there was so much about that logo that I loved. So
I love that.
It made me very happy.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah.
It's a great heartfelt, grounded
Absolutely.
story. Sorry, I love that. So you talked a little bit about, what inspired you to start Maxady, and a little bit about, maybe you could be a little bit more specific about how it aligns with your personal and professional goals.
Sure. For me, I had always said for years my goal was to not have my kids have college loans. Right? That was just, and my husband and I were aligned on this, like we wanted to be able to pay for college. And when I left Smith College, it also meant I was leaving a significant tuition benefit on the table.
Right.
So that was scary, from the risk taking. Yeah. So in my mind, my professional goal for the longest time was I wanted to be able to pay for college for my kids. And anyone who sent kids to college right now, we have 2 going at the same time. It is quite expensive.
Right.
And I remember thinking in my mind, there was this money piece to my professional goals.
Sad? Were you sad because you thought maybe that was going to go away?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was terrified. And I adore my husband to death because he is a very calm presence, Dave is definitely the person who's like, it's going to be fine. This is going to work.
My favorite phrase, you can move that mountain.
Right. He's definitely that, that cheerleader behind me and in a very calm way. So when I freak out about things or I'm like, oh my goodness, do I have clients lined up? And I'll be like, do I have clients lined up for 9 months from now? And he's like, well, it's 9 months away. You'll be fine. He just has that presence. So I had that piece.
I know.
And then I realized, really, when I think about my professional goals, what I really wanted to do was build something that allows people to connect and that helps people love their jobs. And so it's not just straight up career coaching, because I still do that. And I will say I'm happy to help people find jobs. I'm really good at it. I help people quickly. They get what they need. But what I love doing is working with executives to help them figure out how do they lead teams.
Yes.
So not only do they love their job, but everyone in their organization does.
Right. And they love being led by them.
Right.
Like they trust them. They know that they're real. Yeah. I love that.
One of Gallup's studies came out years ago, and they've doubled down on this over time, is that they realized that and they call them followers, so not employees or, whatever, your staff or your team, they just use the general term followers. But what followers need from leaders is trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And if you as a leader can give people those 4 things fall into place, right? Because we all know people rarely leave companies. People leave leaders. People leave managers, right? Rarely have I had somebody call me and say, I love my manager. I love everything about my job. It's the company that I don't like, right? It's a rare occasion that's the call. 98% of the time someone calls me, I'm working for a leader. I either need help figuring out how do I work with that leader. So how do I manage up? So teach me how to work with that leader better.
Sure. Which is a very insightful thing on their part.
It is. Right? Because
I think
it is, right? Because managing up is hard, right? And I think that's where I love working with teams with strengths, because if you can know the strengths of your leader and yourself, now you can start to look at, okay, how does this work, right? I don't know, about a month ago, I started working with a team that the leader of the team, his top 5 strengths are 5 strengths that nobody else on the team has in their top 10. So he has a team of about 11.
Isn't that unusual?
Right. It's super unusual. So he is smart that he hired people. He always said, hire your weaknesses. And I was like, oh, I love that, right? I'm a firm believer in that.
Right.
Hire people different than you.
How rare is it that you even meet somebody who's actually done that?
Right. And self-aware about it.
Right.
But it also means that his lens and how he approaches things is very different than that of his team.
Sure.
right? He is somebody who approaches everything from a very strategic standpoint, right? High level strategic, analyzing data, like that stuff.
As you should.
And his team is very much a relationship building team.
Oh,
right.
nice.
So their strengths are all about how do I make it right for the people?
Yeah.
And so it's been so interesting to work with them because there have been times where they're clashing. And this is a way for them to look at their strengths and start to understand each other.
Sure.
Why they're approaching things from that way.
Right. And I love the fact that, they probably could have continued to function okay and well in that space, but recognizing this could be so much better. Imagine if, and you take off, right? Right,
because people who really lean into their strengths find they're wildly successful. Don Clifton is the one who came up with strengths, and he had this, line that he would always say is, right, like, let's stop focusing on our weaknesses and lean into our strengths.
Yeah, and you know what? And why? Why waste all that time? I mean, I think self-awareness is important, too, to understand all that sort of stuff and where your shortcomings might be, but to dwell in that and become hindered by it, or why can't I change this, why can't I be better at this, and why can't I, it's just for your self-esteem even, it's just not even good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the other quotes that he always used to say was weakness fixing prevents failure, but putting effort into your strengths leads to wild success.
Right.
And I always think that, right? My number 34, so strengths are 1 to 34. My last one is consistency. Consistency is not my thing.
I wish I brought mine so I could see what I can't remember I don't even think about my 34.
Excellent. That's what you're supposed to do. I will say, right, I just laughed when I saw it because I remember thinking instantly, well, that makes total sense. I am terrible with consistency.
Yeah.
I don't like doing things the same way 2 times in a row.
Right.
I love things changing and all of that, which makes sense why Maximizer is number 1, where I like to take things and maximize them, take things that are good and make them better.
Right.
And for years, it would always stress me out, right? Every time I would set goals for myself, they were always goals that required me to be consistent in something.
Or reviews that you've had.
Right. Performance reviews, right? Why do we constantly, I always, when I work with teams and I can get them to look at their performance reviews and change them, the first thing we talk about is how do these sound to the employee? And if you ask the employees what they usually sound like, here's a few things you did well this year. Nice job, Mo.
And
here's a list of the 5 things you need to change. And here are your goals for this year. And you know what? They're probably the same bleeping goals that you've had for the past 20 years.
Opportunities for growth.
Right. Your opportunities for growth almost always are things that you're not great at. And
never will be.
And never will be, right? So instead, I work with teams and say, okay, if you sit there and you think, I'll use you, Mo, right? Like, Mo, you're a great connector, right? You are great with bringing people together. You love that connecting piece. And so you should be doing more of that, right? Because what happens is when we start to look at those so-called weaknesses, consistency for me, if I'm putting so much effort into trying to be consistent, it means I'm not putting any effort into being a maximizer or strategic or communication.
That's my happy place.
Right. It's not just your happy place, you're good at it.
Right.
So why are we making you do the things that you aren't great at when you're going to be much more wildly successful doing the things you are good at?
Right. And your organization as well.
Right. And I think as an entrepreneur, this is always the tricky point for me, right? Because for the first year or 2, it was just me. I couldn't afford to pay people to do other things.
Right.
And then I got to the point like, oh, I can start to pay people. So my website, what a difference it made.
It's huge.
Paying somebody to do my website.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Right. And before that, it would take me
conveys,
hours.
It instantly conveys, on top of being aesthetically beautiful, I mean, it conveys a feeling. When I look at your website, I feel something.
And that's exactly what Lauren and Phil wanted from it, right?
I feel something.
Their goal.
I feel like warm. I feel like this person's going to get me, all of that.
And that was their goal.
And I just am putting that together too. I haven't really stopped to think about your website, but that's really what is going on.
And for me to do that, again, it took me, I just was looking at an old flyer that I did about my coaching, and I sent it actually to the folks who did my website because I just redid a flyer that now looks like my website. And I said, gosh, what a difference.
I know.
Like this one.
I remember the first one.
Right. It was.
Which is not bad.
It wasn't bad. It's not my area of expertise. So it took me hours and hours and hours and hours to do, and yet it still wasn't as good as I thought it would be.
Right. Ever.
Right.
Because that's not our expertise.
Right.
You know, it's just not, you know, I'm creative, but, you know, I have no business creating a logo.
Right.
That's a whole different thing.
Right. And the people who can do these things do it faster.
Yeah.
Because they've done it a million times.
Right.
Right. If I'm doing, I think of the website just as a perfect example. I'm doing it for the first time. It's going to take me hours and hours and hours. And I add a page, I'll add a link to this podcast or things like that on it. And even that takes me way longer than it should.
Yeah, I know.
Because I have to go back and watch the video they sent me on how to do it every single time.
It's not your thing.
It's not my thing.
Can you share with our listeners some of the challenges that you faced while you were building Maxady, your business?
Yeah, I think for me, the challenges have always been being the solo person.
Yep.
And trying to find people.
Yeah.
Right. And over time, I've added those little pieces. So, at one point I started, finally using a bookkeeper to do my bills.
Huge.
Right. What a difference. Paying someone to do my website. Right. So there were those little pieces. And then for a while, I had a small 5-hour gig with a nonprofit in New York City. So 5 hours a week with them. So I felt that little bit of team camaraderie. And then I finished that actually last week. I've been doing that for about 3 years working with them and decided it was time to let that go because it was taking time away from my business. But at the same time, I decided to launch a podcast with a woman that I met at a conference.
Which we're going to get to now.
Excellent. Right. And so I decided to do that because I was missing that. It was hard for me to not have that person to talk to all the time. So now Christine and I talk weekly because we're recording weekly.
Right.
And now I have those pieces. And so I think sometimes those hurdles, it was either lack of knowledge. So I would take a class. I took a couple of classes through the Center for Women Entrepreneurship. I've taken some things through SCORE, right? There's so many resources out there. And I know here in Easthampton, you guys are starting co-starters, right? And so those types of things are really helpful because I met other entrepreneurs. I met other people going to the same thing. And then I started to realize, okay, I really do know some of these things, right? I've learned them and I've put them into practice.
Right, yeah. I think it's hard for entrepreneurs or people in general to understand that although we end up, when we're solopreneurs, doing everything, there comes a time where doing everything is costing you more than it would than taking the sacrifice, right? And investing in someone and taking care of your bookkeeping. I have this conversation with my husband all the time. It's like, we have our farm, and I'm like, Mike, it doesn't make sense for you to be mowing the lawn every week. You don't have time to do that.
Right.
But yet he does. But someday he will take me up on this.
Right.
So you mentioned your podcast. Let's dive into that, and you tell me the name.
Love it. So I have to say, we landed on Embrace the Squiggle. Christine, who's my co-host, lives in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
And she
How did you meet her?
I met her at a conference over 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. So you know each other.
We just clicked at the conference. We ran into each other at that same conference every year.
Sure.
For a few years.
Yeah.
And every time we'd see each other, we'd always say, we have to do something together.
Yep.
We need to find some way to do something. And so a few times we did some webinars together.
Sure.
For a little while, we were trying to do like LinkedIn Live and stuff like that together. And nothing was taking off. And this past year, I said, what about if we did a podcast? We were both podcast guests on the podcast that the people who did our website, they did her website too. And so we were both guests on their podcast at different times, and we both had a great time doing it and said, let's try this.
Nice.
So she flew out here, and it was going to be called Unfiltered Career Adventures was the original title. And so we liked it, and we were like, okay. And we were sitting on the couch and talking about all the things about what an unfiltered career adventure looks like.
Right.
And we're like, it's very wordy.
It is wordy.
It's unfiltered. As much as we love the word, it's not.
I know.
It's not a great title. And she said, I just want people to embrace their squiggly careers. And we're like, embrace the squiggle.
There you go.
And Christine laughs at me because she said it. And I said, I can see it on a hat.
Yes.
I can see it on a mug.
Yeah.
And she just laughs at me because I was more excited to get the swag that went with the logo because I could see
things that you need to be thinking about.
100%, right? Because I've seen logos that you would not want to wear, and I am so excited. We actually just bought cutting boards from Lindsay Levante's husband, Sam.
Yep.
And I'm forgetting SLG Carpentry,
perhaps.
I think is the name of his company.
Yes.
But we just got 30 cutting boards with our logo in them. They are beautiful.
Oh, wonderful.
And what a great gift for folks, because it's not a t-shirt or a mug that you have a million
and
of.
I love that you're supporting a local.
That was it, right? I wanted to find a local business, and we were doing something and saw Sam set up. I think we're at a winery or something, and Sam was set up with his cutting boards, and I thought, those are beautiful. And he said, oh, now I can burn logos into them.
Yeah, cool.
Perfect. Such a great gift.
Nice. So your podcast, Embrace the Squiggle, explores navigating the twists and turns of entrepreneurship. What motivated you to start this podcast, and what key lessons have you learned thus far? Because you just started.
We just started, yeah. We dropped episode 10 yesterday.
10 weeks.
It's not actually just entrepreneurship. It's just squiggly careers of women.
Okay.
So though, if you listen to it, you probably might think entrepreneurship, because what I will say is that so many of the women that we talk to end up landing in some sort of entrepreneurship, either as their full-time gig or as a part-time side gig.
It's funny how that happens.
Right? And a couple of our folks went from one full-time job to another, but it's really about this whole idea that when we're young, we think our careers are going to be this like perfect straight line, right? I'm going to go to school to be an accountant. I'm going to study accounting. I'll get my master's in accounting. I will take my CPA exam, and then I will be accountant until I die. And then you hit 30 and you're like, oh, maybe I don't want to be an accountant. Then you hit 40 and you're like, okay, I've done this for 20 years. I can't do this for 20 more. And how our careers take these twists and turns. And some of our guests have been moms and really talked about how being a mother really changed their career path. And some of our guests have, cared for other family members or had an issue with their own health. Like, there's all these things that hit us in life that derail that perfectly straight line.
And we had the most recent derailer, disruptor of all, a pandemic. Right. So, and how I can't imagine that there's no one that has been affected by that and talking about their career and what they want to do and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Right. And 5 years ago, I remember working with folks who'd say, I want to work from home. And I'm like,
do you?
Don't we all? Right? Like,
but do you?
Right. What a great idea. Right. And thinking about what that would look like and how that could work, and petitioning companies for that, and giving them this whole idea of how they can petition to even work 1 day a week from home. And now, right, a hybrid is pretty common.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of folks are able to work that. Some people work full time from home. Companies are not as geographically focused. And so there's all these different pieces that have opened up.
Right.
And I love hearing all these women tell their stories. And from, we had Sarah Haynes, who's on The View, was one of our guests, who I love. Sarah, my favorite story Sarah told was, at one point she was in college and her volleyball team was doing terrible. They had lost a bunch of games in a row, and they're usually really good. And they had a sports psychologist came on.
Oh, interesting.
The sports psychologist handed her a bunch of markers and said, throw them in the air, and I want you to catch all the markers. And so, she said, you have to throw them really high, like you're, throwing a volleyball. So she threw them really high, and of course the markers scattering all over, and she caught none. And then the sports psychologist said to her, I want you to throw all the markers in the air, and I just want you to catch the blue one. Right? So she said from the moment she put them in her hand, she's looking at the blue one, she threw them in the air, she focused on the blue one and caught it.
Yep.
And started thinking, okay, that's it, right? I need to start focusing on what is the thing that is most important.
Yeah.
And at different points in our life, what our blue marker is different than it was 5 or 10 years before.
Absolutely.
Right? I ask people all the time now. I used to have different questions for it, but now that Sarah's told that story, I told her I'm stealing it, and I'm going to start asking everybody, what's your blue marker?
Yeah.
Right? What is the thing right now that's important to you? Because if it doesn't align with everything else with your life, right? If the thing that's important to you right now is making money, because like for me, I'm in a money making mode at the moment because my kids are at college.
Sure.
Great. Right? It's not the only thing that's important, but it's one of the important things right now. It's a priority right now.
Yeah.
Once they graduate college, that priority
lessens
significantly.
Right.
Right. And so I will still do the same work, and I love the work that I do, but I will
Clearly.
I will be able to approach it with a little less stress some days, I think. So
I hear that. How do you believe embracing uncertainty and adaptability can benefit, aspiring entrepreneurs and folks who are, in current, maybe even long-term careers, in today's rapidly changing landscape, right? I mean, because as you and I think you and I have talked about this before. Change is not going to go away. Change is it's going to accelerate. And I've also discovered on a personal level that not only has the rate of change increased in the world, but as you're going from change to change, the rules in between that guides those changes change it even more quickly.
Right.
The rules are always changing around the change.
It's so much,
It makes my head, like,
I mean, I think of it even just in a workplace. And as a kid, I remember talking to my grandfather, and he grew up in Ireland, and he would say, like, no, of course we didn't have a TV, right? Like somebody, when the telephone came finally, right, somebody in our area had a phone. He grew up kind of on a farm and then in the quote unquote city.
Yeah, you had to go down the street to find a phone.
And you went down and like somebody had a phone and someone run to your house and tell you had a phone call, right? Like that sort of thing. And I think of the world that he went into. And then I got my first job in 1992. And the company, when I was working for at the time, I was working with people with disabilities and helping them find jobs. We had one computer in our office for 20 staff. And so we would sign out times for the computer. Right? You'd be like, I get the computer from 2 to 3 to write whatever report I need to.
Right.
Or things like that. Right. Could you imagine these days doing that?
No, I had a word processor.
Right.
Before computers were ever even a thing.
Absolutely. Right.
That's how old I am.
Typewriter. Right. I had a word processor when I went off to college.
Remember?
Right, that's what I brought.
And I thought it was the best thing ever.
Oh, it was the coolest thing ever.
I know, right?
Right. And so I think of just how rapidly things have changed in the last 10 years. Right. I think of things like AI, of how quickly that's changing.
Oh my God. And how radical.
Well,
and that's not going away either. That toothpaste is out of the tube.
Right. Well, and it's actually been around for a long time. I think so many people are thinking because things like ChatGPT came out recently that it was, or that these things are more noticeable recently. But truthfully,
we've been doing it.
We've been doing this for decades.
Your Fitbit.
Right.
All
of these things have been there. But I think about how many things I now do so much faster because of AI. Right. To me, it's the blank page syndrome. I am terrible with a blank page. So I'll go into ChatGPT and
just to get started.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to write about. And I have a conversation with it. Here's what I want to write about.
Yep.
Give me an outline.
Yep.
Or somebody that I was working with is not an event planner, but all of a sudden she has an event drop in her lap that she has to plan for her job. And she's someone who I'm doing executive coaching with. And she was really stressed out. And I said, go into ChatGPT and say to it, okay, I have to plan such and such event. Can you give me an outline?
Right.
And is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Right. But it gives you a starting point.
Well, but here's the other thing, around perfection, which, I forget it. I forget the name of the rule, but it's the 80-20.
Right.
Right?
80% great, 20% it's fine.
And how long do we lean on this perfection thing and not ever get started?
Right.
We just need to ship it.
And sometimes it's not bad. And for me, it's always like, I can't think of the first line, right?
Yeah.
When I used to have to write papers in college, I would start in the middle.
Right, me too.
And then go back and write the beginning and the end.
Right.
Because I know what the middle would be and the beginning and end were hard.
It's first line.
Right.
That first sentence. And you're like,
And that's where I think some of the AI bots can be really helpful to kind of pull that. And I think for entrepreneurs, right, it's so helpful. For me, social media I'm good and natural on social media if I can get on and just talk randomly. You want to hand me my phone and videotape me talking about a topic, great. But I need the topic, right? I'm not great at thinking about 30 topics for a month.
Right.
And so I'll go into AI and say,
right,
give me 30 leadership topics to talk on this month.
Awesome. And so, that's perfect.
Right. There's just those little things that I think can really help. But when you think about that rapid change, right? My daughter, in one of her classes last semester, the professor told them, I want you to use AI to write some of your papers, in the sense that I want you to do it and then I want you to scour it and find the errors in it. Because it's not always right.
No.
Right? Because it's pulling from all over the internet. And we all know there is false information all over the
And
internet.
pre-2021.
Right.
Right.
So
fascinating. What are some of the memorable moments or insights you've gained so far from Embrace the Squiggle? And have they had a significant impact on your own entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I mean, we started filming or taping in January, so we're not that far in. But I will say, Sarah, right? Sarah and her blue marker was 100% there.
I love that.
I love her blue marker story. I told her it's going to be like all over the world now. And I think the other piece was just listening to folks making these decisions. And quite often, every single person who we talk to who has gone into some sort of entrepreneurial piece has said things like, I wasn't sure it was going to work, but I was going to give it a try. And if it didn't work, I was willing to insert whatever it was they were willing to do for work, right?
Yep.
They were willing to go back to waitressing at Friendly's.
Right.
One person was like, oh, I'd go back to helping people get jobs, right? Everyone had a thing that they said, I'm willing to go back to this. So most of the folks had something in their back pocket that they said, okay, if this doesn't work, I feel good.
Right.
And they were willing to take that leap.
Always something.
Right.
But we forget that. We forget that. And we forget, too, that sometimes maybe that other plan B, even though it's not the career or the ultimate thing that you think you want to be doing, it gives you time to, like, not have to be so in your head.
Right.
You know, like I can just go and I can learn how to be a barista and have fun with that for a while.
The other thing that I think came out of so many of our talks was that power of the pause, right? That power of, if it was, a number of people talked about going to a retreat or just even taking a day to just not do anything, and one of the things I think that happens with entrepreneurs, and myself included, is our days get packed, right? There are so many days that I'll look at the clock and it's 2:00 and I haven't gotten up since I sat down at 9:00.
Right.
And
well, Zoom hasn't helped that.
Right. Zoom totally hasn't helped that. And I think for the nature of a lot of the work some folks do, right, it makes sense. Their jobs are sitting at the desk based. And I think that idea of the power of the pause and getting people to see that, to getting people to see of thinking and pausing as doing or as rejuvenating, to just being able to step away. And if it's take the dog for a walk, if it's leave your desk. One person that I was working with lives in New York City and is in a studio apartment and is on a 5th floor walk up. She's like, I can't just go for a walk because it takes me 10 minutes to go up and down the stairs, right? So we just talked about little ways to be able to just step away sometimes.
Yeah, and it's really hard to, myself included, I get into a groove, I happen to love what I do, and I just don't take that time. And I'm really, as of this week, I have done that for myself, and I've had a really great week.
Yeah.
Right? And I've and then prioritize it, not, again, remembering Stephen Covey, not everything is quadrant 1.
Right.
Right? And also realizing it's okay, not everyone's reaction and emergency it needs to be yours. And in my role, it tends to be, but there's other things that I need to be really focused on and I have to be thoughtful about.
Yeah.
And doing that and saying, all right, Mo, you don't have to respond to this email today. Right. It can be tomorrow or the next day. Do the best you can, but
right.
And it's opened up my brain. I'm like, oh my God, thank God.
Well, so one of our guests, I follow her on social media now, and so she actually started posting on TikTok and started posting on TikTok about books because she loves books, and all of a sudden had 100,000 followers on TikTok, right? Out of control. Decided to drop it on Instagram 6 weeks ago and already has 70,000 followers on Instagram.
That's cool.
Right? Because she loves talking about books. And decided to, at one point said, would everyone want to go on a retreat? Like if I booked a really cool location, let's all go. Absolutely. She sold out I think there was one ticket left today for her fourth one
Nice.
in like 3 months. That she has sold these out and it's gone wildly crazy.
Nice.
And she said one of the things, and this is a side gig. This wasn't even supposed to be a side gig. This was just her posting about something she loved on TikTok, right? She didn't look at this as starting a business, and now it's exploding as a business for her, which is fantastic. But she was telling the story about when everyone thinks their issue is an emergency.
Yeah.
And one of the examples she gave was someone texted her, because she used to give her cell phone number was what was on her website, and people would text her and call her, and someone texted her and said, I have a big emergency. Do you have 5 minutes to hop on a quick call with me? Like, can we get a hop on Zoom? I have to show you this. And here she's thinking, right, their website went down. Like something really big was happening.
Head's on fire.
And house wasn't on fire. This person wanted to know which LinkedIn headshot she should use for her LinkedIn, because she was updating her LinkedIn that weekend. Yep. Right. And to this person who was building out their LinkedIn, it felt like this is an emergency. This is the time I set aside for it.
Yeah. And I don't want to take away from that, but
the rest of us hear that and we're like,
okie dokie.
Really? Like you're calling somebody to ask that question? And I think sometimes it's thinking that through, right? That it's everybody's emergency is not your emergency. There are very few people listening to this right now who legitimately are in a career where true emergencies happen, right? Most of us are not in careers where it is life or death.
Right.
And I think if people understand the expectation of when you're going to get back to them, that's great. One of my clients has every week on Monday, she redoes her outgoing email message. And so she always has a fresh one. That's awesome. One. So she always has one that goes every time. And so she'll update it and say, right, thanks for emailing me. It's, the week of March 1st. I am going to be in trainings all day on these 3 days. And on these 2 days, I will be responding to emails.
I tried that.
Thanks for your patience.
A couple of weeks ago. And I had it up there for like a week, but I need to get back to that.
Yeah. Right. And
I
think
because it takes pressure off of me, because now I feel like I've at least said to folks, look, I've got some other things that I need to focus on. I will get back to you. It may not be today.
Yep.
And that it just lightens that burden.
Yeah.
I have a strong sense of responsibility. Like I'm responsible to get back to this person immediately. It's crazy.
And it's not. And the other one that I loved, somebody else that I work with, I think it might have been someone on the podcast actually, their automatic response says, thanks for your email. It in general takes me 24 hours to look at the information that you sent me, make a decision. And in addition, it might take me an additional 24 to get back to you because of what's going on.
Yep.
In general, I respond to almost all emails within 48 hours.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's really good.
Right. And so that is her always response on her email.
I'm going to readdress that, Colleen.
Right.
Yes.
And so, but it also gives people a sense. So if I email her, in my head, I'm like, oh, she's going to get back to me in 48 hours-ish.
Right.
Right. So now I have that expectation in my mind.
Right.
Right. I think of it the same way if you're waiting for, results from an x-ray or something, right? You go get an x-ray and they say, we're going to get back to you by the end of the day.
Right.
Well, your end of the day might be 5. Their end of the day might be 8.
Right.
And so at 5:02, when you haven't heard,
you're freaking out.
Right. You're freaking out. You're getting really mad. You're starting to call the doctor's office and be like, it's the end of the day. And they're like, oh no, our day ends at 8. Right. So if you set the expectation for folks, and folks know when they're going to hear back from you.
And they're usually
I feel like that helps.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone really needs an answer in less than 48 hours,
they'll call you.
Right. Right. And it also gives them a chance to really think, is this really an emergency? Right. Is this really something that requires me getting back to you immediately?
Right. So, in wrapping up here, Colleen, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for both Maxady and Embrace the Squiggle? And how do you plan to continue making an impact on your professional and entrepreneurial community?
Sure. This year for Maxady, I've pulled in 2 contract coaches, actually 4 contract coaches, 2 who are career coaches and 2 who are executive coaches, particularly in the DEI space.
Yep.
And so I'm kind of building out some more work, so they have some work from me.
Wow.
All 4 are excellent women coaches.
Nice.
And do some really great work. So it allows me to do more of the training, which is what I
Where your
love to do
heart
the
is.
most. I love working with teams the most and getting teams.
Yeah.
I love doing keynotes and conferences.
Yeah.
So
You shine.
I love it, right? And so I'm trying to give myself space to do more of that.
Yes.
And be able to kind of bring other entrepreneurs into the mix. Like the 4 women that I'm bringing in all eventually want to run their own kind of coaching businesses.
There's your mentor.
Full time.
You're mentoring.
So it kind of allows me to bring them in. And then the podcast, I'm loving it. Really, we're just out there trying to find some interesting guests. I'm scouring LinkedIn to find folks. We have folks booked through July at this point. So
wow, it's weekly.
It's weekly.
That's a lot of people.
Every week we land. Yep. So we
Good for
figured,
you.
we have, I think at this point we realized we have about 28 people kind
Nice.
of in our line to get on the podcast. So
Sweet.
if you are a woman who's had a squiggly career, reach out. I'd love to hear from you and kind of get your story out there.
Nice. Awesome. So where can folks find you, connect with you, learn more about you and what you're doing
Sure.
and why you're doing it?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, Colleen Delvecchio. I am also on Instagram. Embrace the Squiggle is our podcast Instagram, and Maxady LLC is my business. And you can always see my website, which I mentioned, right? That Lauren and Phil did. That's maxady.com.
Nice.
And you can get in contact with me through there.
Sweet. Well, thank you for taking time and helping me get back into the swing of our podcast. We kind of took a little bit of a hiatus. There's a lot of things going on at once for us, but and easing me back into the other thing that I love to do, which is share other people's stories and what they're doing and why. I want to know the why,
Right.
right? So thank you
Thanks, Mo. This has been great.
for all you do for the Chamber and us and me. And I also want to thank Easthampton Media once again for all that they do to help make us great. If you want to know more about them, they're at emedia.org. And you can catch us either on YouTube or audio and at easthamptonchamber.org or on our YouTube channel, eMedia's YouTube channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and that's it. That's what we got. Over and out. Peace.